I'm Algenon Cash, and you're locked in. Today, we're talking about the future of our city right here in Winston-Salem. For years, I've written, spoken about the issues plaguing Winston-Salem: stagnant growth, disinvestment, a lack of long-term vision. But instead of just repeating those problems, I want to shift the narrative and the focus to solutions. That's why I've invited Jason Thiel, president of the Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership, to join me for a deep conversation about how we restart the momentum and chart a new course for our community. Jason, how are you, man? Thank you for locking in with me today.
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I guess to get going, you and I, we've known each other for many, many years. I don't want to necessarily assume that my audience knows you as well as I do. And I know you've had a long storied history in downtown revitalization and downtown development, even prior to you becoming coming here to Winston-Salem. So let's just start there. Maybe give the audience a little bit background and introduction to who Jason Thiel is.
You bet. So the real quick version is that I was born in Wisconsin, grew up and went to high school in Pennsylvania, and then went to college in Philadelphia. Graduated college in 1995, and then went to graduate school at the University of Florida with a degree in city planning. From there, I started my first job in Jacksonville, Florida, where I slowly got into more and more downtown development stuff. I worked for the Downtown Development Authority there for about 4 years. Prior to that, I was with the planning department and worked on their downtown plan. I moved to Fort Worth, Texas between 2003 and 2005, and then started here the first day, January 2nd, 2006. And so I've been here ever since.
Yeah, wow, man. I can't believe it's been that long. You're coming up on 20 years here in Winston-Salem. What would you say your largest takeaway is over those last couple decades?
I think that I've been tremendously pleased to come to Winston-Salem, and I love this city, and I'm proud of the things that have accomplished. There are many challenges that we have, and I think that you've written a lot about those. And I think my goal is to work on those topics, to work on those challenges, and to play my role. I think downtown development, at least in how people see it generally, is to understand what we do as an organization. And I thought it might be kind of to give you the fast version of what we do and why we're here.
Definitely.
Okay, great. Well, the Downtown Partnership is a private nonprofit. A lot of people, for all the right reasons, I think that, they have a limited amount of time, but to dig in a little bit, back in the 1980s, 1970s, downtowns really faced a crisis that had been building for 30 years or so. And it was something that when I grew up in the 1980s to the 1990s, cities like Philadelphia, where I went to college, and other cities that I visited really struggled. Their downtown struggled, the city struggled. Throughout that movement, there were many efforts that were tried, but at the end of the day, public-private partnerships like the Downtown Partnership popped up all over the country, and we try to work with City Council to supplement the things that they do by also adding private resources. Sometimes people describe it as a very large neighborhood organization with paid staff, and that's probably a pretty good analogy. We do events. We do a lot of advocacy. We do programming, such as Clean Team, and we also do marketing and a lot of other promotions, and get into our downtown plan, which I know we'll talk about. We also have a foundation, which is a separate board of directors, but closely linked with the partnership, that does small business loans and other benefits for downtown, such as our SLIM grant, a street level improvement matching grant that we've done for the last 10 years or so.
Jason, when you arrived in 2005, and, I started my professional career in 2003. So I remember very vividly sort of the downtown revitalization that had kicked off in the early 2000s. Describe how you perceived the vibe and energy of downtown Winston-Salem on the year that you arrived, compared to maybe the vibe and the energy you feel downtown now, 20 years later.
Yeah, that's a great question. And briefly, because just not to belabor it, but A couple of things had already started to take place in Winston-Salem. The Innovation Quarter was just off to the start. The Nissen building was under construction. The Mellow Mushroom was just about open, and it opened after I started in early 2006. But I would say that there is an excited group of people that had a lot of passion for downtown that were made up of people that also there was a lot of people who did not believe that downtown was going to do any better than it was previously. I spent a lot of time talking to people about those issues, but by and large, I think the city, everybody involved was very committed to a bettering of the downtown, and that's what appealed to me. And it was really obvious by the energy on the board of directors and the mayor and the folks that is that they knew that downtown needed to be better in order for the whole city to be better. Nowadays, I think that with the super success of the innovation quarter, a lot of the historic rehabs of the buildings for residential in particular, I think things that until the pandemic, people felt very good about downtown. I think the pandemic changed things considerably for the dynamics that are in every city across the country. And so as you move into now to today, I think that for us, the feeling is one where I feel it's more in line with people realizing that they got to be proactive, get involved. We love our downtown, and there's a lot of, in a lot of ways, that requirement, the challenge does appeal to me. And so going to a city that has everything taken care of is maybe not the most exciting professionally, but it would be for the city. But going through the city and working on projects, our downtown plan, things like the amphitheater are helping. But there's across the country, I think, a concern about where downtowns are going and where they're headed. And I think that's why I wanted to do this podcast and talk about what our future and what we're trying to do here and try to get people to lock in on some of the ideas that I share and have an opportunity for other people to talk about them.
I would totally agree with you. I do think that there was a seismic shift in Winston-Salem and specifically our downtown area as a result of COVID. I would also mention that that shift might have started maybe a couple of years before. It was like really bad timing that our highway was shut down for 2 years, and then directly once soon as we got our highway back open, in terms of access in downtown, COVID hit. And so it was almost like a double whammy. And I do think it's been challenging for downtown to recover since then. As I go around now and I talk to people, and you're in some of the same Facebook groups that I'm in, and you hear a lot of the same chatter that I hear around town. But the number one complaint, Jason, that I think is on everybody's lips is parking in downtown. And
Right.
so I'm curious to get your thoughts about parking affordability, accessibility, and just whether or not it's user friendly for our residents and workers and visitors that are coming into the center city.
Yeah, I think this is really a great question. I thought about how to answer that if it came up and to make it um, so parking, if you were to look at any downtown and you were to just kind of a global perspective, Algenon, if you were to survey the stakeholders in just about any downtown in the country, the two things that are going to come up and have come up over time is parking and public safety. Those are the two big things that really hurt us in the 1970s, 80s. And then you have two different trains of thought about parking. I think when you talk to people about parking, you're going to say there are people that are just really have a lot of, and this is of no, this is, there are a lot of people that have spent a lot of time in urban areas and are used to tough parking spaces. And I think that they're generally more amenable to the changes that have taken place in our downtown. The other one is where people are really angry and they say they're never coming downtown again. And I think it comes from what is a myriad of different parking obstacles or challenges or opportunities, if you want to say it that way, that present themselves to the parker coming downtown. And I think the thing that first started, like we had a downtown in 2006 where you could pretty much park anywhere on the street. The fine was $5. That really at the point, like the city has a decision, and we at the Downtown Partnership are not responsible or capable. It's the city's entire the city council. They decide what the parking policies and they enforce them. The DWSP doesn't own any parking. And so we're really in an advocacy role here. And the advocacy for us was that the on-street parking meters with a quarter, so many of them were broken. A lot of people complained about technology, and it was time to do the parking meters. In a lot of ways, the city probably waited too long to do the on-street parking. They were probably late in the mix, and what really hurt them, and our organization really tried to get them to do an interval parking rate, which would have been maybe 50 cents, 75 cents, a dollar, then up to $1.50. But it was what was the increase, the six-time fold increase over that time was something that we felt would be a shock to the system in a time where we knew that this was not something that was going to be, it's just retailers, restaurants, we knew that they were all facing challenges in this new environment. And I think that that's something that in time they have been able to look at the prices, and they've made some adjustments here and there, but it's really something that I think people should know, that that on-street parking system is really only eligible for, like, you can get a ticket only from 8 to 5. And quite frankly, I mean, most of the time the parking enforcement folks are, maybe cut off a little bit earlier than 5. I won't say where because I don't want to get in trouble for telling people, that they might be able to park for free after a certain time, but those are weekdays. And so anytime you come downtown after 5 o'clock on a weekday or on a weekend, you can park for free anywhere on the street as long as it's not in front of a fire hydrant or a loading zone or some other marked space. The other thing that the city has 2 or 3 parking decks where it's $2 flat rate. And we've put up some signage that's all over downtown. I don't think the locals really see the wayfinding signage as well as maybe the out of town visitors, and that's pretty typical.
Yeah.
A lot of people just don't want to park in the parking deck, and I understand that. And a lot of people, we could talk about that forever, but I think most people want to park on a surface on the street, or they want to park in a surface lot. And I think a lot of people have little surface lots that they know where they can park and not have to pay. And it's just that there's less of them. And what really entered the conversation was the private operators that host private parking companies who are national at this point in time. And I've seen it. That's the one where everybody gets the $85 parking notification fee or whatever it's called. They say it's not a ticket. And that's what really, I think, really ramped up this
Well,
parking.
and Jason, not to cut you off, but I want to really dig into what you're saying right now because I think you're talking about a very important piece. I don't think people realize that these parking lots are being managed by a private operator. I think there's some kind of a misnomer that the city is the one that's operating these parking lots. So can you again sort of clarify the difference between the public garages and obviously the private lots that are being driven by the actual private operators? It's not the city that's brought that private operator in.
Yeah, it's really a great thing to talk about because so few times has there been two people that know enough about something to talk about it. Most people I know that are downtown know this, but for a lot of years, we had the downtown where if you owned a surface lot in your downtown and you leased it to somebody, people were going to just park there. That was rare for them to say only parkers for this business, but in time, technology and a lot of frustration from, let's say that you owned a surface lot somewhere downtown, you would have the customers from nearby businesses using the surface lot that you leased, and the landlord was really taking a lot of, and this was in many different areas downtown and across the country, is that people were parking and then going to the business across the street, whereas the business across the street wasn't paying for the lease on that parking space, or the landlord wasn't paying it. It was different. But what people should know is that the reason that it works for these parking operators is it allows them to control who parks in their space or not. In some ways, they can give free parking to the customers that park in their parking lot, where I think the confusion is that people don't look for the signs. It's dark at night, they don't see them, and they get the fine. And so the question came up from us as an advocate for downtown. We were all over this, wanting to go into the conversation with lesser fines, having regulations. So we talked to the city attorney. The city attorney told us that this was a state, this would require state legislation.
Hmm.
And so people, it wasn't under the city's purview to do that. And then so we started talking to the state and other people. And I'll tell you, the one thing that happened is that we learned a lot about this, is that the alternative to the tickets is towing, and we have had towing even longer, and that's been a long time thing. So you kind of ask yourself, if so we've really turned into trying to educate people that these were private parking spaces. A lot of them you would get towed, but you could also get free if you just got if you plugged in
Yeah,
your
the
license.
validation.
Yeah, and so it just, so many people got caught up in the area where not knowing our communication. I would say that while I still hear complaints about that, and not as many. I think people have become more accustomed to it. But that I don't think that people that have gotten the tickets, a lot of them have said, "I'm never coming downtown again."
Yeah. No, it's been a visceral reaction to it. I'm going to try to move us forward before we run out of time here because we got a couple more topics we want to get into. The other large conversation that I often hear downtown, and from some people it's a complaint, and from some other people it's maybe a little bit of compassion. But when you talk about the public transportation center that's downtown, um, to those folks that seem to believe that that transportation center is going to be relocated, what do you have to say to them? You're in contact with the city, you're talking to the city council, you're talking to staff. Is that even an actual conversation that's going on within City Hall?
There is a conversation right now about actually changing the nature of the transit center, and that's something that is real. And they just conducted a study and started it where, instead of the notion, I don't think that the traction or the complaints about the transit center are leading to this either. This has been something where every every route that comes on the bus system begins and ends in the transit center downtown, whereas there are a lot of people who would prefer to have an intercity route directly from point A to point B without coming downtown. So we have what's called a spoke and hub system. This would be more of a regional transit system. I think the downtown station would still be the best. What I've always tried to focus on is, listen, the city's got a lot of things that they want to spend money on with bond dollars, but the bus station isn't near the end of its lifespan. And so moving it would require somebody to buy it from them at a price. And that would then have to be located somewhere else. Locating a new central transit system is generally a challenge, because wherever you try to move it, you're going to have challenges with people not wanting it there. But it's really a moot point because I don't think the city has any plans to do that at all. And having talked to them, I know that there's a lot of emotion about it. And just through my experience, the best that we've been trying to do is to install as many cameras, to impact, to demand better policing, to go in and work with the property owners to make sure that we call in the police whenever we see something, to say something. But the regional transit system would change how much bus traffic we would see in the downtown area.
Hmm. I like that. And thank you for sharing that with not only my audience but myself. I know I've heard some chatter about this regional transportation system, and I think it would be effective and efficient,
There,
while also addressing some of the concerns that have emerged about downtown as well. The other large concern right now that is not only downtown residents are talking about, but you hear this buzzing about with a lot of downtown business owners. Anytime you have empty storefronts, that's going to drag your energy down. Do you think the city or the downtown partnership should play more of a direct role in incentivizing small businesses to take a chance on downtown space?
Yeah, I do. And I think that's one of the programs in our downtown plan that we adopted in 2023, and it was adopted by the city council. And I think then the question becomes, how do you do that? And so there are many programs that are pop-up retail programs that offer a discounted rate to a very preliminary owner of a retailer. They have a limited amount of time to stay in the storefront. And what it requires is a landlord and a subsidiary or a subsidizer like us. How it would work is we would raise private funds and we would subsidize the rent with a willing landlord, give the tenant there a period of time with a committee, and hopefully it's essentially growing your own retailers and building at the same time activating vacant spaces. Now, some of these spaces, in order for us to achieve that, they have to be spaces that are easy to move into, that have working air conditions. They don't smell like vacant buildings. They have existing plumbing, electrical works, and it would pass inspection for a building permit. And that's really where I think the challenges that we have in downtown on a macro scale are buildings that are so there are buildings that are ready to go that can be leased. Not as many as people believe, but there are some that we could use but the buildings that are a bigger challenge, the ones that really also leave a negative mark, I think would be the buildings on Liberty Street, for instance, all of them vacant. It's a very tough situation because, and this is something that I hope people understand, is that every city, every downtown has some buildings that are challenged with the amount of time that they've been vacant or grandfathered in. The building is going to have a lot of repairs and cost that are very expensive to get it to the point where it is leased. So I think a lot of people misunderstand like a building that is vacant. Like the Woolworth building is a classic example. It faces both 4th Street and Liberty Street, and it's been vacant for more than 20 years, longer than I've been here.
Hmm.
And it's been vacant since I don't know how long, a long time. And so a building like that has got all of the plumbing, the water, the electrical, all of the ingress and egress, probably some structural things, but the cost of renovating that building is going to be, let's say at a minimum, $100 a square foot. And if the rent were to, if someone were to make that investment out of their pocket one time, they would they would have to pay $100 per square foot. But on a square foot basis, the annual rent for that space right now, a really strong rent in that space would be about $15 a square foot annually. So you can see that the investor in that property has got to put in 7 or so years of capital for them to get their money back. So what we really need is long-term investors, and we could sweeten the pot there. And I think you've talked a lot about some really good tools. And I think that's really where our biggest challenge is. For the last 20 years, we've been slowly picking off these vacant buildings, getting people to take a long-term view of them. And I think that these are the last ones left. And a lot of them are, um, very difficult to do, very, very challenging.
Well, it is a great challenge, and I think you and I both know that if revitalizing and reactivating some of these vacant storefronts would lead to more foot traffic, more energy, more vibrancy for sure. And I do think the city of Winston-Salem, to any city council members who might hear this conversation, I do think the city should be stepping in and look at some type of a financial subsidy that allows for that transition to occur in these buildings that have accumulated deferred maintenance that need to be brought up to code. I think a lot of these challenges that you and I are talking about, Jason, just come down to math. It's a math problem, and we do need the city to step in to try to help solve that math problem. The other thing that gives downtowns vibrancy is jobs. And when you've got companies downtown and people working downtown, your restaurants are going to do better for lunch, and there's just going to be a lot more energy in your downtown. However, I think that there's probably some misnomers out there, Jason. Some people probably think that the downtown partnership is more responsible for corporate recruitment in downtown than maybe it really is. So talk to my audience a little bit about that. What's the partnership's role in actually creating jobs, and who should really be focused on running with that ball?
Yeah, so the our economic development strategy for our scope of work, we're not a big operation. We have two full-time employees. We have a half-time employee who's our admin, and then we have our clean team, which is contracted. So we don't have a big office, but our main preoccupation is storefront space. And I think a lot of people, we don't get involved in larger office buildings. That's really for the bigger players in town. And so for me, our focus has been on trying to get a grocery store, trying to get retailers, trying to keep our existing businesses and working on the storefront spaces. And we had a real slog of, a lot of times, one of the things that happened in our storefront space, I will tell you though, is that one of the things that I was told, and I think it's true, like you can have an entire building that's vacant, office building that's 30 floors tall. But I think more people are going to notice the vacant deli that is not in business anymore than the 300,000 square foot building. Like people's visceral view of your city is at the ground floor.
Hmm.
And while we have across the nation, like the macroeconomics of the national trend has been people working from home, hybrid working situations. And so that has impacted foot traffic. And so lunch traffic in particular has been a challenge. So when you look at it nationally, it's been the same thing in other cities. We now have had some really good luck with the good news is that our old office buildings, a couple of them have been converted or will be converted to residential, which is a really big deal, in my opinion. I think a lot of cities would be jealous of how much office space and other buildings we've converted through historic tax credits. But the 8 West 3rd Street building is another one. The um, the um, the Lowy building on 4th Street, all of the sadly, we lost all of the tenants in the ground floor of that building. Now the whole building will be renovated and all of the leasing spaces will be available for new tenants. But it would be great if we could get the old Truist building converted. I know a lot of people say that that's not possible, that the building just doesn't is not conducive to that. I guess I still hold out hope that the Reynolds building could be done. I really think that we could do something like half apartments, half for sale in the green building. It's got attached parking. The parking is owned by a separate party. So getting those assembled into one parcel and having someone with the wherewithal to have enough confidence to, I personally think that there's a market for luxury condos on the top floor of that building because of the views and the proximity to Old Salem, the all the different walkways and downtown itself. I think I'm very bullish on that. The county courthouse, I'm beginning the one that's empty. That's another big issue for downtown, and I just don't know. It's unknown to me whether or not that can be rehabbed. It's going to be a discussion. It may be a point where, and that's something that I've really been asking the county. How long are we going to wait before we, make a move on this building to either sell it or demolish it. And those are some of the things as an advocate for downtown. I don't like that building being vacant forever.
No, I totally agree with you, and I think some of the other properties that you mentioned, Jason, are you're spot on. My audience know I work in real estate day to day. I talk to a lot of developers and investors on a day to day basis, and consistently, I've been telling people that I really believe downtown Winston Salem is the greatest real estate opportunity in all of North Carolina right now. We have so much intrinsic value. We have a lot of opportunity. We are going through a little bit of a cold season right now, but things are going to bounce back. And many downtowns don't have the number of residents living in them, the amount of infrastructure that we've created in our downtown. And I just think that we've got a pretty bright future. I've got a couple more questions I'm going to work in, and I'll get you out of here, Jason. You alluded to a full grocery store in downtown, a full
Right.
service grocery store. You mentioned that just a moment ago. That's something we've been talking about probably since you moved to town.
It
So
is.
what's the real barrier there, and what do you think would take to finally land one?
Yeah, the real barrier for us is two things, is that they really do look at the demographics of what grocery stores are and where they already have existing. Um, I think in our downtown plan, what we really talked about is the area around the stadium, and that could be anywhere in that land. I believe that whoever builds it will definitely benefit from its construction. But you got to figure you got all of the redevelopment of West End and West Salem and Washington Park, all of the downtown development, all of the Holly Avenue, everything that is in the innovation quarter, all of that could take into a parcel like the West End Center that Wells Fargo Wachovia left would be ideal. It used to be the Sears, has parking on the roof. And I think one day we'll all wake up and say, we got a grocery store coming. And the more and more, like, what's really interesting about grocery stores is that you really can't incent them to come to your city or their location. The reason for that is that real grocery stores, the main big ones, is that they make their money on selling perishable food and they really know their business. And so they can't have the meat and poultry and vegetables go bad and the dairy stuff. And so they need to be somewhere where they can move it. And I believe that we're very close to having that market. But I also think that when you draw the circles like they do, and they look at the different circles, Publix didn't help us by moving into Miller Street.
Hmm.
And that's something that circle starts to come into the West End to the other areas. And so folks who live in downtown, a lot of times people don't think about this, but a grocery store, people shop. A lot of people, I'm surprised how many people I get that are very emotional about downtown grocery store. And then there's some that really aren't, but love shopping anywhere they can, like shop multiple places. But I'll tell you one thing that even if we located a shopping grocery store, let's say there was a place near or in the innovation quarter, or on the other side, on the bookend side, it was near West End or near the baseball stadium. Folks that live on either side of downtown probably aren't going to walk the full distance to the grocery store, so they're going to drive to it. That's kind of it really kind of comes down to the cost of building the parking center or the grocery or the parking within the grocery store is really very cost prohibitive but Publix did it. And so I think that it's a part of our downtown plan. And I think for us, we just have to be patient and continually pursue. We do have a local franchise here in town, Lowe's Foods.
Hmm.
I know Don Flo tried to talk to him, the same parking lot that he's using for the amphitheater. He tried to recruit the grocery store, and there are many other efforts. But at the end of the day, they're just not certain that they're going to sell all of their perishable foods.
Well, I appreciate your commitment to it, and I value your optimism around it, and that's what it takes to make big things happen and things that oftentimes are hard to do. So I appreciate the work that you're continuing to do around it. Many years ago, I worked with the team to try to actually get a co-op grocery store to downtown Winston. We were trying to get a second Deep Roots to come over from Greensboro. So I know this has been something in the workings for a very long time. And I think that if we continue to grow our downtown and grow our resident population like we've done so well, I think we get more jobs coming back into downtown and return some of that vibrancy that we once had. I think that grocery store becomes a more real possibility as well. One recent win that you just had, Jason, looks like City Council did approve the amphitheater that Mr. Flo's working on. Real quickly, maybe speak to that and how you think that might be a game changer for downtown.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And I think it really goes to when we did the downtown plan in 2023, we had a great response to questions that we did with online surveys. Mostly we did in-person surveys, but the online surveys really had a huge response. And that's a sign of the times, particularly during the COVID era. 2023 was still kind of in that area. But the one thing that we knew that with decreasing foot traffic from office vacancies. We needed to create foot traffic downtown, and we needed to do it as soon as possible. And to our credit, to his credit, Don Flo really picked up on that downtown plan idea, and he really he really cares about our city. And just getting to know him privately and talking about that and being involved with him on that, um, he's he and his partner Jim Bramer and Bucky Dame, they're moving forward, and I know that they want to be open by the spring of 26, and that's what
Wow.
they're and I think that they're moving deeply into the planning. They've still got to work out the details of the noise levels and some finalize the lease agreement. But I think we had, um, I think for me, what really excites me is that you work on a downtown plan. A lot of times people see those go into the shelf, but in this case, it inspired really a leading citizen in our community who owned the only parcel of land in downtown that was probably large enough. But the thing that excites me the most is its location right in the heart of downtown. It has the benefit of really being a benefit to all the restaurants and retailers and hotels. If the number of people, and I think to me, we need to do more of that. The Stevens Center needs, when you're talking about the real shots to downtown, you're so right about the road closure, real tough decision. The COVID coming right after that was just merciless. And then the Stevens Center closing was kind of a mini version of the road closure. And it's the corporate relocations with Truist. These are the things that we've really, if people really care, these are things that our local businesses come and support them downtown. I think that's really the biggest thing is that you could get free parking on the street after 5 o'clock. During the day, parking on street is $1.50. Go, and I'll tell you, you can park pretty much. There's easy parking on the street during the day. That's the one thing that this on-street parking system did do is that it does make more space available so you can slide in and out pretty quickly, which is, you know, a benefit. You just have to pay for it. Not all the places in downtown. Some of it is, you'd be surprised. But I would encourage people to come out and support their local businesses. I always tell people that the people that we have running businesses downtown are some of the best people in our city. And it's an honor to be able to work here. And I think the thing that about the amphitheater that also is just it's rare to see something come about. He's using his own money, and it's rare that you see like the conversation in many cities is we got to subsidize this public use or some other public involvement. So I personally think, and what I've seen so far, is I think the amphitheater is going to be very nice. People are going to be very proud of it. It's going to seat 5,000 people, and we're going to have some great shows. And I think it's going to be that and some other things that I think are going to be really important. I think the Lowy building coming online is going to be important, them getting the retail tenants, the
Yeah.
Stevens Center. And then I think the long-term view of getting the sweet potato space leased for me is something that sadly, a lot of times, like we kind of sit in the sidelines waiting for the landlord to work out a deal with a tenant. And when that happens with a space that's ready to go, it's not we're not terribly involved in that. That's a conversation. We're not
Yeah.
entitled to be if the tenant needs help with finding people and stuff like that. But in this case, you've got great let tenants and landlords. It's
Yeah.
just that the restaurant industry right now, people I think need to understand just how challenging the cost of food and labor is, and the demand for labor is on restaurant owners. If you know a restaurant owner, support them.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And Jason, I do appreciate this conversation. And to my audience, as you know, there are many challenges happening downtown, but just try to reflect on this conversation with Jason Thiel and some of the ideas and the optimism that our leadership is working towards to revitalize downtown and just get the momentum going back in the right direction. I hope today's conversation sparks some ideas about what's possible for Winston-Salem if we choose to act boldly. These conversations matter because they give us clarity, but they also require your support to keep happening. If you found value in today's show, I encourage you to make a donation to help us continue bringing voices like Jason's to the table. Your contribution directly fuels independent conversations about the future of our city. Until next time, I want to encourage my audience to stay locked in with WTOB because that's where you can catch me at every Sunday morning. That's where the Locked In Show broadcasts. But if you happen to miss me there, hopefully you're subscribed to the podcast and you can grab that on Apple, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you get your favorite podcast. You can always lock in there. And until next time, as always, stay locked in.